And now we have Jason's amazing score. I will just say one thing about the mock-up is that there's something a little understated about it, if you know what I mean. I think that in real life, there will be certain elements that are a lot stronger, and the sound of the wind section is not going to be so sort of intimate and casual sounding. I think the strings are going to come out, much more effectively, much more aggressively, especially with this accented staccato and so on. And sorry, just moving a couple of things around on my desk again. So, first of all, I'm just going to apologize. There will be a little bit of background noise. Some people are coming over to fix some windows that are just kind of really old and let in too much noise from the neighbors when we're trying to sleep. So anyways, that may start to occur, but if there starts to be banging, I'll just pause and then I'll come back and finish the evaluation. Okay, but don't be too distracted by some footsteps and closing doors and stuff you might hear. So, looking at the evaluation, let's play fair and look at the criteria as we go. Pitch weight in the middle of register of the piano in the original score. How does that affect the arrangement? And I think that you have sort of been, you have stayed pretty much in the register that was indicated by Falla. Now, I think that there's kind of just a couple notes about the score. I don't think there's any need to have large, sort of largish sized time signatures in concert music like this, right? Because and it's not like you need to have a really big key signature reminding people that there are big changes and so on. There are no changes in this piece. It's all 3/4. So I think just a standard size 3/4 at the beginning is fine. Okay, so I think that it's okay though, because you have you have enough variation and enough innovation to your orchestration so that it doesn't feel, it's like that the fact that it's that everything is more or less placed higher doesn't feel like a problem, right? You've managed to kind of get your way around that, even though you don't really quite address that criteria. Okay, and then the same thing I could say for the thematic material being repeated often, sounding repetitive if you orchestrate exactly the same way throughout. And indeed, you did kind of copy paste the first through fourth bars onto the ninth through 12th bars. And when I'm kind of throwing that word around, copy paste and so on. And I don't want anybody to think that I am using it in a way that is denigrating the effort of the orchestrator that I'm evaluating, because I did some copy paste as well on my score. It's just a procedure, right? I'm not saying that is bad or good. All right. It's just whether or not the reuse is something that will sound repetitive in the context of the work, right? So I feel that in this case it's so innovative, and it is so charming, and it makes you want to hear it again, right? So that is the kind of escape hatch for this criteria, right? Is if what's done is kind of so charming and enchanting and compelling in a certain respect that you want to hear it again. Now, having said that, there are big, huge, splashy tutis that I've already evaluated that in their way are more effective than this scoring. Just in terms of big, massive scoring. that they are more effective in that regard, but they don't necessarily fulfill that criteria of or they don't necessarily get to escape out the back door, right? Because of or the escape hatch, because they because the intention is not so much charm, it is more spectacle, right? So so here, despite the fact that like there's some fortissimo scored in there, it really is more charm. And when by charm, I don't mean some sort of throwaway cutesy kind of thing. I mean more like charm as in what a shaman would do to you, right? Like to cast a sort of a spell. So yeah, straight mute. Very, very high scoring here in your first trumpet, and it's going to be extremely powerful, right? It's going to overpower your first flute right in there. So I see that you've marked this down to like a kind of a hopeful forte. I just feel in scoring like this sort of very bright, light scoring that you are trying to accomplish here. I think that C trumpet is the way to go, right? I mean, it's not like it will make all that much difference if you are giving this to an orchestra that just commonly uses B flat trumpets as part of their culture, or and you give them a C trumpet score, they'll just play it on B flat and they'll make it sound the way you want it to sound, right? Because they'll be used to getting C trumpet scores and just adapting them for their B flat trumpets. Sometimes you get that culture, and then here in New Zealand, there are a lot of players who have got a C and a B flat, and they'll just use them interchangeably. But generally speaking, like the whole trumpet group, the whole trumpet section will use the same kind of trumpet for the same kind of color, right? So, all right. Well, not to get too distracted with minutia, but yeah, I mean it's just fairly high, I would say, for the B flat, and it's still all right, but it is going to be extremely penetrating and is going to kind of it's going to interfere a little bit with the flutes and the clarinets, but I mean it's still pretty much workable, I guess. I would just score it for C. I think there's just a little bit more control up there. Okay, and then this little stopped chunk. That's kind of fun. Now, you have kind of a strange thing going on here. You're scoring 1 3 2 4, right? But you're scoring 1 2 3 4. So yeah, you like the interlocking parts, right? So this is actually a second horn part, this E right here, and this G is a third horn part. So you did the right thing, and you didn't have to do this. You could just say horn in F. If you're going to score this way, then the first and second are on top, and so on, right? And then right in here, like this is more like a third horn part, like doubling the first in like this kind of exposed scoring, right? And less of a second part. And same thing here, like this just very kind of brash. You don't mark the rolls here, but I'm assuming that you're saying 1 and 2 again. This is really like more of a third part, right? So anyhow, so I like you bringing in the E flat clarinet, and that is such a penetrating sound that it's a good match for this. But I'm not sure that it's strong enough. Just the doubling of the E flat clarinet with the first violins, and then the second violins being all on their own. I'm not sure if that is a strong enough doubling to balance against what's come before it. Lighter as it is, right? And everything aside in the mock-up. I feel that if you're going to double the top, you should double the bottom, right? And even if that means just throwing in giving something new to do to your second clarinet player, or maybe bringing in English horn and just having them do that, fill in that job, right? And then then right in here, we're kind of running into one of those 12 common errors, right? We've got, and it's also a little confusing too, the way that all right, okay. So there's a bunch of stuff going on right in here. Okay, first thing is that strong string scoring tends to absorb flute scoring at the octave, right? So that's one of the tips from 100 More Orchestration Tips, fairly early in the book. Now that doesn't mean that the flute player is always outplayed. If they want to have a solo sound, they can definitely play it, but there will be a tendency for the strings to absorb it, right? So that's the first thing. Second thing is that means, essentially that you'll either have a soloistic flute sound up here, or it will sort of disappear into the resonance. But either way, the weight of you're putting the weight of the melody in the lower voice rather than the upper voice, whatever you're doing, right? And even here where you're adding oboe and the first violins and so on and so forth, right? So there's kind of that means that the top is going to sound kind of shallow right in here. So if that's what you intend, you want that kind of lighter sound, that's fine. But then it's completely left out here. Right, so I'm just not sure what you're doing in terms of the proportions and the scaling of the melody. And then here, like by contrast, just jumping ahead and looking at this kind of echoing section right in here, you have a nice strong support from the firsts, and then this kind of driving and then suspending note, right, from the second violins. And then an octave lower, doubling, but then no doubling from a lower wind. Like you've got the da 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 happening twice from your A2 oboes, but that is not a doubling of the melody below, right? So it's just a little patchy, if you know what I mean. Now that patchiness is fine. There's a certain art to that, right? And if that's what you are pursuing, then it's getting close to that, but I mean, just saying, like, it's just in terms of a consistency all the way through. I would just say, watch out. Just really be aware of the consequences of that. Now here, this is nicely done, except one thing that I would say is that there's so much diving down on one end of this bar that you can just really hear it. There isn't any illusion that everybody is running up to the top alongside the piccolo, right? So try to vary when people are changing register, and then it will be less obvious how you are compensating. Okay, and the other thing too is like the biggest culprit in this, in really directing the ear to say, hey, look, everybody is jumping down here, right, is the trumpet, right? So if you can at all, like maybe have the maybe have the trumpet just like not even come in until about right here, and have them come in on this lower D, right? And that way it just like is consistent throughout as one straight line. And then just vary some of what's going on here in the strings, right? Maybe have your first violins continue up a little ways. Maybe they could go all the way up to A or B before they jump down, right? And and maybe the violas can be starting lower from like maybe about right here, so that it just isn't all just this sudden drop off, right? Now that kind of leads us. We're talking about how this, the melodic treatment, and there isn't a huge concern about it soaring too high. You scored your piccolo in here quite nicely, and that kind of compensates for some of those skyscraping notes. Now, our next concern is really the accompaniment figures in those alternating sections. And they're done all right. I mean, I think you can feel some of that, some of the jumping around, the kind of back and forth quality of it. That all works well, but I think there could be a little bit more support on the downbeat. You've got your first clarinet playing on the beat. You've got your E flat clarinet playing off the beat, and then on the downbeat on the third, right? So I think there just needs to be a little bit more support from strings, whether it's pizzicato on the cello or some other kind of thing to make it a little clearer. Okay. Now, yeah, stopped and open. I would say pick one, leave out the other. Either it's stopped and then it's open, or you're saying plus sign and then harmonic circle to indicate the beginning of an open section. You really don't have to overdo it. The horn player knows that a plus sign above it means stopped, right? And it just saves a lot of clutter. That's just really the plus sign is a way of getting around having to write in stopped. Unless you were using this to cue the your sound set, and otherwise, like just putting a plus sign over the horn note would not trigger the stopped sound in your sound set, then that's understandable. But I would say just in that case, hide them. All right. So let's move on to the middle register section. Like the sense of relentlessness if there's no textural contrast, but you do have textural contrast. What is nice, you just really have the strings coming into their own nice, strong, accented notes. This doesn't sound too much like scrubbing on a washboard. Bum, 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 da 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 da. Because it's right in the middle register still, and just a little bit of cheerful triangle in there. It's kind of fun. And then you just have judicious doubling of the melody line, oboe and flute on our first violins, and just a touch of trumpet on the lower part of the octave. I don't think you really need to have the second trumpet come right in here. I mean, I see the reasoning behind throwing in the second oboe here, just to kind of give the first oboe player just a little bit of a rest before they jump into this. But since your first trumpet player is not doing that, there's no reason to give it to the second trumpeter here. And then that same thing, and this does set up the next section really nicely. Maintaining driving staccato, transitioning smoothly into the next passage, that definitely is something that you're doing. So let's jump to that next passage. All right. Now we get to the section B. And I'm also calling it up on my other computer. So, contrast of color, breadth of texture, and middle register scoring. That is certainly something that you do address. And there's this other concern, keeping interjecting notes from sounding too glaringly repetitive, right? High interjecting notes. And there's this one little squawk right here. It just sort of sounds like a chicken clucking, right? And, the first time I listened to your mock-up, I thought, well, I'm gonna tell Jason, maybe that's a bit much. But now I'm listening to it and I'm saying, look, this is village music. If there isn't a chicken clucking in there, there's something wrong with it, right? So I think that just the occasional cheep of a bird or a cluck of a chicken or whatever is perfectly fine in setting a scene with this sort of music. But all that aside, differentiated roles in closely spaced melodies, overlapping accompaniment figures, highlighting inner voices, right? That's what we should really think about here, right? So, so we've got here's where we run into a few problems. Okay, there are some things that just don't quite speak out as strongly as they could, right? And one of them is this right in here. You've got ba 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 yeah da 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 dum, and there's that da da ba da da da. There's that middle voice right in here in the second violins. I feel that it's, considering the weight of everything that's going on, the harmonization here in the bassoons, the use of the lower strings and so on. I feel that is it's just a little neglected. It doesn't really, up against your first trumpet and its pungency, its projection. This doesn't really stand much of a chance to complement it, right? So I would say this needs to be thickened a little right in here, whether or maybe brought out with a little crescendo mark, or maybe doubled or something like that. Now, right here, you're asking for pizzicato tying across. So but it really looks like arco because that's what you've got in the cellos, right? So I'm a little unsure here to what you actually mean. It might be good enough if you really do intend pizzicato to mark a half note, because that's pretty much what you're gonna get. This kind of like this speed and this kind of stuff to everything. I think it's better. You're safer off, like this, just throwing in a half note. All right. And this is really effective, though. This little flurry going up into the downbeat as we're going. That is really effective. And the doubled violin groups, that's really, and the just touch of bass drum. There's a lot about this that is beautifully right. And you're telling, you're giving the player a tons of time to get ready, although you still have this little triangle thing right in here. Ready, hard mallets. Okay. And then it's kind of, we've got something else happening here. Now, did you notice that in the mock-up, this horn solo just like was almost invisible, right? And I think it's because you didn't mark the dynamics here, right? So, it would really be kind of nice. There should be a rehearsal mark here of B, right? And so, like at the beginning of a rehearsal mark, it would be nice if everybody had their dynamic markings, and you assume that that's where the page would be turned, right? So I would say, like maybe forte, dolce, or poco forte or something like that. Just like not too big, but definitely in the presence of the of everything else that's going on. Now, of course, this is where you have that sort of driving ba 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 happening in the second violins, and we've got the doubling here from the bassoon this time, so it comes through a little bit strongly. But I think that it's also a place where you could add, like I sort of suggested before, but here I would say definitely add a like crescendo diminuendo kind of thing. Right? I think that is there is meant to be driven. Now I don't know why you are just going doink 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 with your viola and violin here compared to this. I guess you sort of want that sort of bouncier feeling, and because you've got this very kind of these very intense pairs of slurred notes. Well, I'm not so sure about that, but because it sort of takes away from the real smooth, that smooth descending kind of tone right in here. And the other thing too is that the yeah, okay, well I won't get into it too much because I know in the piano part it is they are written as eighth notes. So okay, so then going on, we get to the part where I mention in my original my original criteria. Keep the triplets from overwhelming the melodic line. And the problem here is that they are kind of underwhelming, right? They you've got your middle strings right in here, and in the mock-up, you can barely hear them, right? And I think that there would be definitely a similar phenomenon happening in a live performance, and you can solve the entire problem just by restoring the accents that are originally scored in the piano score, right? Damn, damn, right? It's just like it needs that bum, that punch at the beginning of the triplet. And then, but the big problem, the reason why the triplets are kind of disappearing on you there is because of the prominence of the trombone, right? So if you're going to bring trombone in there, you're going to tell them forte, they're going to soar up into their tenor range and stuff like that. They're just going to swallow everybody else's resonance insidiously. Even even these beautifully scored horns right in here. So I'm not saying don't use trombone because it's such a cool sound, but you may need to upscale your dynamics for the rest of the orchestra, not the xylophone. Sort of like one of those memes where people are praising everybody and there's one jerk in the middle and says not you, and and then continues on saying you and you. So not the xylophone. The xylophone does not need to be any louder, right? But I think giving a trombone a prominent part, marking it forte and marking everybody else mezzo forte is perilous. I think it's perilous. Okay, just watch out, because the trombonist. It's not so much that trombonists like to play loud or that their instruments are naturally loud or anything like that. That's the big joke, right? But it's more that their overtones are very, very powerful, right? It's not that there's anything about the instrument that necessarily is abnormally just the comparing to everybody else's form of tone production and the scaling of the instrument and everything else. The problem is the overtones being so penetrating, right? And that just makes everything that a trombonist does to just seem more exaggerated, right? So the next question becomes is like, how much does flute get swallowed by the trombone below it? Would it be better to use clarinet here as something that will play over the trombone and be clearer, right? I like the way you fatten things up here with a oboe, though. I think that's really nice. What if it were clarinet here and then dovetailing into flute and oboe following? Then I think that it would have more of a chance. So yeah, but I mean, saying that, I don't really want you to change a bunch of stuff about this to make it work, because I really love a lot of the way that things work. I love the bassoons right in here. I love how they kind of keep the motion going alongside the double basses without getting too exhausting. I like you throwing in that little jolt of tuba right at the bottom. I think like you have to be really careful about this. Like you marked a bunch of mezzo fortes in everybody else's parts, and you're saying sforzando on this low E for the tuba player. So what you're going to get is right. I mean, it's really going to punch below because they have no idea what you mean. I think it would be better just to get rid of the sforzando note taken from the piano, restore just the accents, right, and then mark it like maybe mezzo forte, right? So I would say have everybody playing forte, and then you can you do this mezzo piano crescendo to forte and so on. And then I would say mark your xylophone and tuba mezzo forte, right? And then I think you'll get a really good balance. And then as far as the snare drum, whatever you feel like you want to do in here, and however that balance is going to be fine. Probably mezzo piano, maybe just a little, bringing it forward a little bit, right? And then I think that you'll have a nicely balanced section right in here. So really that's kind of all I feel that I can add to this. Now, having picked it apart like this, for the past 25 minutes or so. It does not mean that I think that this is poorly orchestrated at all. I think it's brilliant. I think it's a fantastic bit of work. So, it's the kind of thing where, like, would I spend this much time picking it apart if I didn't think that it was worthy of being improved, or if it was worthy of offering you alternatives and insights on it, right? So I just say, like, really nicely done, and the kind of entry that really, like, helps to qualify the whole purpose of this challenge is to is for everybody to see what everybody else is doing out there, and to help celebrate the ingenuity of our different orchestrators, and this absolutely qualifies in that regard. So thank you so much, Jason, for submitting this score, for supporting on Patreon, helping the channel get by, and to all of my patrons out there who are supporting the channel, and everybody out there in the community who is keeping this alive. I really, really thank you. Thanks so much. And there are probably going to be a lot of semi-brev viewers for these semi-brev scores, and I'm just going to say, probably repeat this quite a bit, but just to say once again, people who are in the same kind of collective group, right? Whether it is everybody on one collection in like one of the website evaluations groups, or like part group A, group B, whatever, or like all the semi-brev entrants and so on. If you guys could comment on each other's scores, right? Like you guys are kind of forming these little sub communities, right? And if you could support each other with feedback, comments, even if it's just to say, hey, I really liked what you did there, or, I learned something new from this, or I never thought of using tuba in that way, or, whatever it is. I think that they would really appreciate it, and it would, this is the part where, this is the part of the year where this community comes alive. So please be part of it. Okay. It's so important. At this point, I've released a bunch of videos. I think people are starting to get a little punch drunk, who have, kind of started off strong with their comments and kind of commenting on everything. And I so appreciate their effort, and their time. But, now it's time moving forward to new people who are being evaluated. I think it's really, really great if some of these new entries and the orchestrators who entered with them become part of that chain of communication, right? So that it doesn't just turn into me talking about everybody's scores into a vacuum. All right, that's the thing that I would really, really regret, and that's the kind of thing that, like, there have been a couple of challenges in the past where just really the comments died down, and then barely anybody talked about anything till kind of the end of the whole process, and that just became harder and harder on me. So the more people comment, the better it is for me, the more I want to do this. All right, so I will leave it at that, but once again, thanks everybody. And now I am just going to go on to the next evaluation, because those people who were going to be repairing our windows have not shown up yet. Maybe I can squeeze in another one before they shut me down. Thanks everybody. See you again soon.